Hello everyone. The Pillar Chase 2 Recode's release is coming really soon. However, its current state while it is in testing leaves a lot of improvements to be desired. Currently, the date is March 16th as I'm recording this, so if any changes that are bad or good aren't mentioned, they were likely made after that date. In this video, I'm going to talk about everything I find in the Recode that's a flaw and how I would improve it. Before I get into the review, I just want to note that this video is my opinion, including the changes I will suggest. However, I will try to justify my changes along with why I see those things as flaws. Another thing is that I do believe the Recode is an improvement upon Precode, and ultimately is a better base game to work off of. I love Pillar Chase, and I really want this game to do well, but Recode has its flaws that need to be considered now rather than later. Finally, I'll now first go over the monsters. Generally, the monsters in Pillar Chase are pretty good. Their movesets are far more interesting than their pre-code versions, but what makes these monsters so much less appealing to use is the fact that they just feel a lot weaker. Currently, the Recode still is very survivor-sided, just like the pre-code, and I really feel that these monsters should be stronger. They should have an advantage over the survivors, and the only way I can really see that is if the monster's stamina was better. I really do think that every monster deserves to have buffed stamina, and along with that, I feel that the large stamina delay that all monsters have should be entirely removed. There needs to be some kind of advantage that the monsters can get, and they can't get that advantage if they have bad stamina with slow speed and unreliable abilities. Of course, for a character like Vapor, he has the abilities to be able to catch up, even if his speed and stamina could be underwhelming. But for other characters like Rosemary, AO1, and Aoni, they are pretty incapable of catching up in the right circumstances, simply because they just don't have the stats to catch up. Especially after playing AO1 recently, monster stamina just needs to be so much stronger. And it's really the only way I can see the monsters getting more of an advantage without just buffing them to all be faster. So I really do think there should no longer be a stamina delay, and their stamina should get buffed. Moving on to Vapor, he does not need many changes at all. The only changes I would do to Vapor is to maybe nerf his Scorching Grip and the damage on his Fire Ring. Like maybe nerf the damage on Fire Ring down to 30, because I do feel that Vapor does get a little too much damage, but overall, Vapor is probably the only monster I can say is in a pretty good state. Every other monster definitely feels like there's a lot to be desired, but Vapor is pretty solid. He has about everything you could want, and I honestly think he's pretty good for the most part. Next up, moving on to Rosemary. Rosemary certainly is a weak character, and I feel that she is very lopsided with her balance. Rosemary can't chase well, her traps and zoning pressure aren't really great, and really the only thing that Rosemary is incredible at is ambushing people with Demonic Shriek. You can Demonic Shriek on someone and just start taking a walk with them as their entire health bar gets depleted. And then you can just hit them. Hit them twice, they're guaranteed dead. And the only way you can have a chance to get Rosemary off of you is by knocking her back and hoping you can get out of the hitbox, which sometimes doesn't happen. Now, obviously, Rosemary's a weak character. You won't want to take away what makes Rosemary strong, but I don't want Rosemary to have to rely on this. Same thing with all other monsters. I don't want a monster to feel like they have to rely on one of their abilities or one of their gimmicks to win. I want them to be able to use their full moveset. That's what makes Vapor feel so great to play. All of his abilities are good. Demonic Shift is good. Scorching Grip is good. His fire ring is good. Like, all of those abilities are good and they have their uses. Practically, when you're playing as Vapor, you're constantly using his abilities because they all help him. But when you have Rosemary, who has abilities that otherwise may not be as useful, and really her only powerful one would be Demonic Shriek by like a landslide, I really do think that Rosemary deserves a lot more. So the changes I would do to Rosemary is by buffing Rosemary's speed with +1. I would make her essence last longer to help her zoning. I would nerf the Shriek to have a limit. So let's say there's a 5-second limit. And then possible other buffs I would give to Rosemary would be adding more to the Withering debuff and the Soul Shiver debuff. So possible things I would do is either one, for the Withering debuff or the Soul Shiver debuff, it doesn't matter which, I would make it so that those debuffs would add a slowness to them. Either when you get withered, you get slowed, or when you get soul shivered, you get slowed. I want these zoning abilities to actually help Rosemary chase people and help her land the demonic shriek, because I want Rosemary to be strong and have good zoning pressure. Another thing that could happen as well is making it so when people get withered, it gives Rosemary like plus 15 or 20 stamina back. So let's say you're chasing somebody and they pass through her essence. Rosemary will be given stamina back for people getting withered. These are all just possible buffs that could be given for Rosemary, and I really do think that these will help. I think giving her more speed would help her chase people. Making her essence last longer helps her zoning pressure. Nerfing her shriek helps compensate for the other buffs. And giving more to these debuffs makes her zoning more rewarding, which I want. I want Rosemary's abilities to be more rewarding for her. So I would do all of these changes. Moving on to Veilum, I'm just going to say, before I start talking about how he is right now, Veilum was one of my favorite characters made in the Recode. His prior moveset, I really loved using. It was very interesting and it felt very rewarding to use. And I can't help but feel that the most recent changes were entirely unwarranted. So, simply put, what I'm going to say right now, revert Veilum back to how he was prior to his most recent rework. I am not a fan of this recent rework, nor is a majority of people that I've seen talk about it. And it's such a shame that this happened without any chance for community input. They never asked how Veilum was, if Veilum needs changes or not, because really he didn't need changes. And I really feel that the developers do need to try and get more community input before making major decisions. And this is a big example of what would happen without that community input. You just end up making something that was good and then changing it to be worse. So I would revert Veilum, as I think before he was perfectly fine. I would have changed a couple things about his prior moveset, but this new moveset that he has, I don't see going anywhere. So, to explain why I think it's a really bad moveset, I find that his demonic warps feel so much less useful, as now the only thing you can do with them is pull them toward you and walk into them, which does not help as much. They don't give you sprint meter anymore. They don't really... Pulling them doesn't really do much for him, and generally most of the time it's not helping him catch up. It's not helping him land his shots either. His illusions also are now something that he is now way more reliant on, which I don't like. The illusions are AI-controlled minions, and, well, it's like relying on spider skulls with the pre-rework Vapor. It sucks. And the fact that Veilum now has to rely on them in order to get his sprint meter and to be able to get the executions or whatever, it's just bad. The illusions also now have a much bigger delay before you can make them rush, which sure would have been acceptable with his prior moveset, but with this moveset, absolutely not. It does not work at all. The Mimic State also has been severely nerfed and has made entirely useless, making it so that way now you have to lure people in order to gain sprint meter with it, and that the sprint meter drains while you're in the Mimic State. Like, once again, why? You're just making it way harder to get any sprint meter, and the Mimic State was already pretty hard to use. Now it's even worse, and I just cannot see people actually using that. And, well, the only last thing to talk about is the projectile. And what I say is currently it's too slow to really do much of anything for Veilum. His damage ends up being pretty mid, and I just really dislike this rework. And I do not think it would be a good idea to try and convince yourself that this rework is the best version of Veilum there can be. I don't care if you try to buff it or whatever, his previous moveset was perfect. Well, not entirely perfect, but compared to this, it is absolutely perfect. And plus, to further defend that this recent rework is bad, let's say his projectile did get buffed. Let's say that his projectile was made faster. Do you know how annoying would it be to constantly be shot at with projectiles that do 20 damage? Just, if you played with Forest King and Glitching Blitz, do you remember how annoying it was when you just get sniped across the map? Now imagine that, but happening constantly. If Veilum were to get buffs right now, he would just be annoying. Would he even be strong? Probably not. But annoying? Absolutely. Making your character purposely annoying is not fun for either side. So, really, I just want Veilum to be back to how he was. So, please revert Veilum back. Now moving on to Fogborn. I think Fogborn is pretty alright. There's nothing crazy about him. I do think he could use some changes, because I just think Fogborn leaves more to be desired. Now currently, I would say he's not bad, but I want monsters to still be strong, and Fogborn doesn't feel that strong. One of the first changes I would think of is maybe giving Fogborn back his impatience. I generally do not know which one is better anymore, as it's all situational. I feel impatience was a little more interesting compared to exposure, as impatience contrasted his foggy stare, which of course made it a very interesting way you countered Fogborn. You had to keep your attention on him until he used his ability. That was cool, and I feel it also made it so that way he is favored for being stealthy, which I really want Fogborn to play more into his stealth. So, along with that, I would also nerf his Thunder Warp damage. This is something I would do in order to make Fogborn feel a little less annoying, as I'd rather have him get his damage from actually hitting you rather than from his Thunder Warp. Now, either nerf that, or you can rework Thunder Warp, make it more into a stealth mobility move rather than just this damage move with a lot of end lag. Now, do I have a clear idea as to what it could be reworked into? Not currently. There was an idea to make it so that it would spawn fog around him, but, well, I really wouldn't know what would be good for him. Though, I would want Fogborn's moveset to lean more into stealth aspects, which is why I propose a rework for his crawling state. I think that his crawling state should be made where he's actually stealthy with very quiet sounds, because is it actually stealthy if his footsteps are really loud still? So I would make sure that he's actually quiet. Another thing is I would nerf the speed and remove the crawling slowing down the timer. I'm not sure if the crawling still slows down the timer, but its speed could get nerfed or maybe not. Now, I do think that when he gets up from crawling, he should be given a small speed boost This is just to make it so if Fogborn snuck up on you with his crawling, then he would get a little speed boost to use to catch up in a chase after getting up. And I would also maybe buff his bite damage, that way Fogborn is rewarded for sneaking up on you with his crawling. I want Fogborn's crawling to actually be interesting, and maybe make it so that the crawling could do more. Like maybe the crawling could also find people for Fogborn. Currently, Fogborn has no other ways to find people other than having them look at him, which on certain maps is obviously going to be unreliable. So making the crawling state possibly highlight people near Fogborn, sort of like an instinct kind of thing, could make it really interesting and help this crawl be a lot more interesting to use, aside from just being a little tool to use to just catch up in a chase. Though other than that, Fogborn is in a decent state, but I do feel that he should lean a little more into stealth aspects in order to make him a fully interesting character. Moving on to Aoni, I find that he is in a pretty good state. The only thing though is that he relies too much on his mini Onis, and a lot of his moveset feels underwhelming. His grasshoppers are good, they are very good for him, but his brute strength, both versions, the ground break and the burrow, feel very weak. So I would definitely buff those, while also nerfing the mini Onis. I still don't want the balance to be lopsided on characters, and I feel that Aoni should be more stronger in one of his actual abilities than just the mini Oni gimmick, especially because the mini Onis can get really annoying, and obviously, you know what I said about Veilum earlier, I don't want a character to be purposely annoying. So, the first changes I would do would be to buff Aoni's burrow to drain less stamina, while also allowing him to regenerate stamina when he's leaving the burrow. An additional buff would be that the burrow hitbox will no longer knock back either, and instead infect survivors briefly, meaning that while Aoni's getting out of the ground, if he hits someone, they'll instead get that super slowness instead. I find these changes to be good for Aoni, as it would make his burrow much more stronger, along with being a much more efficient stealth tool for ambushing people. It's not really a great ambush if he just drains all his stamina and knocks people away from himself. Instead, he drains less stamina, regenerates some stamina after leaving it, along with slowing people down so that they can't get as far away from him, I feel is much better for this ability. Then talking about ground break, I would just make ground break instant again. I honestly barely ever use ground break at all. It doesn't really serve much of a purpose due to its weird hitbox. It could easily get stuck, and really it's only good when someone is right in front of you, which, you know, it's okay when it like knocks them, but I would find ground break to be more useful if it was that instant long hitbox again. And finally, the mini Onis, I would nerf them by making them have a draining health bar, which, of course, when it's depleted, they die, but it can be regenerated through damage. So, similar to Spider Skulls. I put this change here because I find that having the mini Onis just there for the entire round can obviously be very annoying to the last remaining survivors. There's not really any room for interacting with Aoni when there's just 5 mini Onis targeting you the entire round. They have nothing better to do, so that's what they'll do. And obviously it's pretty annoying to deal with, so I would add this in order to make it so that way the mini Onis probably will not last forever, and it leaves more room for Aoni's other moves to be more powerful. So that's all the changes I would do for Aoni. I just feel this makes his balance feel a little more consistent in his moveset, and he would still be pretty strong, and yeah, so I think this would be pretty good for him. Now moving on to AO1, he is really bad right now. They nerfed him very harshly. They nerfed his speed, they nerfed his sludge whip, his stamina is still bad. Just AO1 is very weak and has no redeeming qualities right now. So obviously I would revert the AO1 nerfs So he should move at 23 speed. That also includes speeding up his sludge whip again, along with allowing it to properly aim. Yeah, for some reason the sludge whip doesn't aim correctly. It like delays where you're aiming, and it really sucks. Like, you just cannot land it. And also, its hitbox is like minuscule now. It just does not land at all. It's genuinely like the size of like a pea. So, you know, just how are you supposed to do anything with this? I understand the direction was probably trying to nerf his base form in order to make his host form stronger, but his host form is actually weaker. Both of AO1's forms are pathetic, and he is arguably the worst monster currently in Recode now, which it's kind of a shame because, once again, AO1 was in a perfectly fine state. This is another reason why they need to, like, ask people why they should do these changes, or should they do the changes in the first place. But yes, revert the nerfs, and then you'd be okay. Now I say okay because I actually have more changes to give AO1. So let's just say this is not the super nerfed AO1, and instead is AO1 right after his host form got reworked. I would do a lot of changes to host form. So for one, whenever entering host form, it highlights everybody. It doesn't do that anymore for some reason, so it definitely should. And I also would give Gnashing Vortex a rework. So instead, whenever you first activate it, it'll do its initial windup and then spawn in that big hitbox, but only once. If this hitbox hits any survivors, the survivors would get automatically pulled into AO1 with like an animation instead of it like actually pulling them. So it's similar to a grab. Then, when the survivor is fully pulled in, AO1 does the bite down and it does a bunch of damage. So take this as a better version of Sludge Whip. I feel that host form's meant to be just this stronger version of his base, and yet his Gnashing Vortex is somehow even worse than the current Sludge Whip. So I would definitely buff it to be something like this, because it allows it to be used in much more situations. Next up, we also have his jump, which either it should get reworked into a new move, or it can just get buffed. If it is buffed, I would remove the stamina drain from it, as why is it draining your stamina? And then also the pin. When you land on people and AO1 tries to swing at them, this misses every time. It's ridiculous. They tried to extend the hitbox, whatever, and AO1 just refuses to hit the person. It's actually funny how bad it is. So really, this pin should just guaranteed hit people, because you landed on them and he did the animation. Why the hell would he miss? So really, it should be a guaranteed hit. So if AO1 were to get buffed again and his host form was made to actually be stronger, which I also think his host form should be longer, it should be extended longer, then I think A1 will be in a great state, as he used to be. That is what I believe, and yeah, I think that'll be great for him. So that'll be it for all the changes I request for the monsters currently in the Recode. Still, I think the monsters are good, but I feel that a lot that's been going on recently is really bad and honestly concerning. These recent changes done to monsters that entirely ruin them despite them being in a perfect state prior is a huge concern for the future. So really, before the developers do significant changes such as this, they should always ask in polls or other forums on community opinion about the character or changes in order to see whether or not it's even worth doing. I already said this earlier before in other sections, but really this is a very important point that I would want people to take away from this, because imagine a new monster comes out and then they just get reworked to be horrible without you even having a chance to like realize what's going on. So, shriken. Yeah, really just, it's concerning. But I am still excited for the monsters, and they certainly are my favorite part. And this section is most certainly going to be the longest. So, without further ado, let's move on to the survivors. Try hard.
I'm sorry, did he just say that his last name is
Top 100 try hard outfits. Now finally getting to the survivors. Obviously, we know that Pillar Chase has always been a survivor-sided game, and it still very much is survivor-sided in the Recode. Is it as bad as Precode? No. But there's certainly a lot of aspects to the survivors that most certainly give them an advantage over the monsters when it otherwise shouldn't be the case. I already talked about the stamina and how that can be improved, but there's a lot of other aspects that I find to be giving the survivors a much bigger advantage than they should have. First, I'm going to start with the items. So, specifically, Bloxy-Cola, medkits, and health boosters. These items should not be allowed to be stacked. As you know in the Recode, you can stack items. But if you're able to stack items that are as powerful as Bloxy-Cola and health boosters, it can be entirely unfair. So I seriously think removing the stacking here is going to be the best choice. There's also another recent change that I find to be ridiculous. Survivors should not be receiving stamina for getting bone broken. Because they made a change where survivors get plus 15 stamina for getting bone broken. What? Why would you be rewarded for getting bone broken? You already get a speed boost for free. Why do you need stamina too? I think it's just ridiculous. Survivors should not be receiving stamina. They should be getting less stamina. But, well, you know, the speed debuff is already harsh enough. Now, obviously, I've talked about all the general things about survivors here, and next up would be the classes. And what I have to say about classes, they're not fun to go against. A lot of people can say that classes have just not been executed the best they could, and they haven't really been changed to be good either. And I will say, the classes are annoying because they are unavoidable. There is so many times where you just get hit or just watch them use their abilities in front of you, and you couldn't do anything about it. They just happen too fast, they don't have any wind-up, so pretty much you're just getting beat up in the round. It's just like Precode's upgrades. You just watch them use their ability, as you can't do anything about it unless you had like a specific ability. It's really just not fun to go against something that's entirely unavoidable, which is why every class that I mentioned here is going to be reworked in order to be much more avoidable, allowing for monster interaction, which of course would include making the classes feel more rewarding to land, but more punishing to miss. Of course, this could come with the extra benefit that classes would no longer drain stamina as harshly for using their abilities, but the monster now can actually stop you, or dodge you, depending on what it is. So now I'm going to go over all the changes I would do for each of the classes. Starting with Frontliner, the Shield Bash could either have a short delay before being usable, which it could work, but it's I would rather have it where instead, the Shield Bash will have a noticeable windup before the short dash attack. This windup obviously would be indicated by a sound and an animation, and the monster could get out of the way. Of course, another thing I'd mention, the hitboxes on these classes should be a lot smaller. They should be more precise. The monster I want the monster to actually just outright run straight into it, because that would feel deserving to hit if the monster just wasn't paying attention, or that you caught the monster off guard. But if the monster predicts you, walks back, walks out of the way, and they still get hit, once again, that's just unavoidable. So I do think that there should be a windup before a short hitbox, little dash attack. Now, if this hits, Frontliner gets the same buffs as always, the knockback and the speed boost. And if it misses, Frontliner will actually experience end lag. Once again, you could remove the stamina costs, but the end lag here is the actual punishment instead of the stamina. That way, the monster practically gets a free hit, a free grab, free whatever, you know. Miss in front of an Aoni and he slows you down, you're just dead, right? Well, maybe not dead immediately, but what I'm saying here is classes can get punished for missing their abilities without it just being losing their stamina. So that's what I would do for Frontliner. Auxiliary is next, in which I say, Auxiliary does not need any changes. Auxiliary is perfectly fine as is. While you could try to rework it, please propose what your rework would be. But for right now, it is good, it is set. Next up we have Vanisher. What I say, Vanisher will have a longer animation on Vanish, which allows the monster to cancel the ability while it's in windup through doing any damage to the Vanisher. Pretty much what I'm saying is, if Vanisher's drinking the potion in front of the monster, and the monster attacks them before they go invisible, it will get cancelled. I want more of these abilities to be cancelled, that way the monster has that room for interaction, that room to punish you for just using the move in front of them. Now, of course, what comes with this change is likely that the Vanisher could have an increase in health to 75, but I feel this is healthier for the game, as once again, it leaves that room for the monster to actually interact. Of course, the windup could also be increased to allow more room for the monster to do something, but either way, this is what I think would be good. Next up we have the Visor, which I believe should just have more windup on Flash and a shorter hitbox, since its hitbox is still pretty massive. It also should have a noticeable sound cue. Once again, this is just so that way you can actually dodge the Flash, because obviously you wouldn't want to get hit by that. And once again, just avoiding these unavoidable attacks. We want them to actually be avoidable, want them to be predictable for the monster, because it's not fun just getting beat up. Then we have Usurper, and I feel that Usurper's punch should always have either an amount of charge required or always have a windup before the punch happens. The hitbox also needs to be shorter, as I'll pull up a clip. You might have saw this clip earlier, but if you just see, I'm literally running away from this guy and he still hits me, which, you know, that's ridiculous. If, like, that's the one ability in the game that does have some kind of windup. And you know what happens? When I run away from it because I actually reacted to it, I'm still hit by it. That's ridiculous. So once again, these hitboxes need to be smaller because they're just not possible to dodge, especially on these maps. Now also, I feel that the block on Usurper should also no longer be able to be gained from damage over time. So, you know, from the steam, from fire, from withering, and whatever, you should not be able to charge up your block from these sources, because obviously that is not fair. And, well, if you miss the punch as well, end lag should be given, because once again, we can punish classes not by just taking away their stamina, but by, you know, actually just causing them to have an end lag. And the final class to talk about is Time Shifter. I feel for Time Shifter, the burst, once again, more windup, shorter hitbox. I also feel that the speed up should only be given if you land the ability and not just given always. If the burst is missed, also end lag would be given as well. The rewind on Time Shifter also should be made longer while also being made cancelable. Similar to how I did it for Vanisher, if you are hit while trying to rewind, it will just get canceled and you won't be able to rewind again until it comes back with its cooldown. This once again just allowing the monster to interact before, you know, the survivor just gets to do whatever they want willy-nilly, like actually making it so they have to use it at a good position at a good time. So those are all the changes I would do for the classes, which they all just go under that one reason being classes should be more avoidable, hence their hitboxes should be smaller, their windups should be noticeable, and generally the monsters should be allowed to interact with them in a way that benefits them. Because currently there's no room for interaction, there's no room for avoiding any of them. They're just kind of annoyances, and it would just be healthier if they were always avoidable. Now, there is a possibility with classes, and that they could be possibly fully removed from the game. Pillow Chase has never really been a game that really ever emphasized survivors having strong innate abilities. Pillow Chase has always been around having really nothing to work with except the items you find on the map, and I feel that Recode would work really well if it still stuck with the passive upgrades that it originally proposed. Now, of course, classes really don't work because 1, the monsters aren't strong enough to deal with them, but 2, they're also just unavoidable. And I do think that the classes can work if they are changed in a way that makes them better to go against. But they could just be removed, and that actually could be a good decision as well. And if you don't want to fully remove classes, maybe the classes can be special items that can be found mid-match. It could be interesting. You get like a temporary usurper or a temporary frontliner, and you're able to use it to try and help your team and whatnot. That could be an interesting kind of mechanic. Maybe there could be special tasks you have to do in order to unlock these temporary classes. That could be pretty interesting and add a little more to the rounds. However, once again, I think classes can work, but I just think they need to be made more avoidable. Other than that, I feel that the changes to the classes, along with just changes to survivor items and obviously them getting stamina when getting bone broken, because that's ridiculous still. I feel all these changes would help make the survivors definitely feel the same amount of strength as a monster, if not weaker than the monster, which I know a lot of people would prefer the survivors to actually be worse than the monsters. So I feel that these are good changes to do, and I also feel that it would generally make landing the classes feel more rewarding because it's harder to do. So that is what I would do for classes and survivors in general. Now that that's out of the way, let's move on to the maps and the objectives. Okay, surely this guy's stuck in the corner, right? Let's go get him. Now that we're on the maps, I feel that really most maps should be smaller. I really don't think that larger maps, especially to the size of some maps in the Recode, I don't think these larger maps are really good for the game. It just takes more time for the monster to find people. It obviously means the survivors just get chased less, which is already a big complaint, and overall, it's not really great for the game. I feel smaller maps just are much better. They're always the maps that people prefer, so I feel most maps should try to be made a lot smaller. Along with this, I also would agree to have overall less tasks to emphasize both the escape while also helping survivors get chased more frequently instead of just mainly focusing on objectives. I do agree that, yeah, you are doing tasks a bit too much, especially if you're not even getting that many Q points for it. Now, currently the Q point system is a little confusing, so I don't really have much to say on it because they just keep changing it, and overall it's really inconsistent still. But I do think that there should just be less tasks on the maps, because it just doesn't feel good if you're just mainly doing objectives that otherwise are tedious. Now, moving on to the specific maps, Dungeon is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Its escape is good. Its tasks are good. There's nothing that really needs to be changed. It's an enjoyable map. Next up we have Eternal Abyss, and it just needs to be smaller with a better layout. I don't think there's enough monster doors. I still think it's too big, and it just still doesn't feel great to play on. Another thing is the soul task. It is just getting more and more tedious, and I really feel that these souls either need to be extinguished instantly, or there should be more water sources around the map, or the souls can just get reworked into being a mini game instead, because it is very tedious to have to walk back and forth with a water bucket to a soul 3 times every time, and you're barely rewarded with any Q points for doing so. It's just very tedious and not really rewarding. So ultimately, please do something with the souls, make them less tedious. Next up is Gilgamesh, which I think is pretty good in terms of layout. I just find that its escape task is too easy. While I did say that there should be less tasks, the escape task for Gilgamesh ties into the code task, which would mean that in order to make it a little harder to get that escape, you'd have to increase the codes. Now, I really do think that it is too easy to get the escape on Gilgamesh. it's definitely too easy because it just ties in with the objectives people are already doing, and then they just spam click on a bunch of cameras in the camera room. Everyone gets the escape code, so the people around the map enter all the codes, and then the escapes open, and 4 people just get to leave immediately. You know, it's pretty easy. It's too easy for the survivors. So I really think that it should be made harder. Either there's more codes, so that way more has to be done, and more would have to be done when the escape code is found, or maybe there can be a new mini game implemented in the cameras when trying to find the escape code. That way, survivors are spending more time trying to get that escape instead of just clicking a bunch of cameras and that's it. Also, there is a huge bug still in the game, which was, of course, the monster-only areas on Gilgamesh. You can still pull people into these areas, like pull survivors into them, because the monster walls or whatever, they don't show up for Gilgamesh's monster-only areas, which, of course, cause people to get trapped. I would be surprised if they didn't know this bug is still a thing, but this needs to get patched, like, immediately. Next up is Pillar Stronghold. I think it's alright. There are some powerful loops. I feel they could get cut down. You know, the loops with the stairs. I feel the middle loop, the middle little monster door doesn't do too much, so I feel that those maybe could get cut down by changing the map a little. But the only other complaint I have for Pillars is the vents. The vents now don't give many Q points, unlike how they used to, and they are very tedious. As a matter of fact, it's not only tedious, but it's actually just straining to do them, which I don't think that's good for your game. So really, there needs to be less dirt, or the vents get reworked entirely, because just we don't want to have a bunch of tedious mashing for these vents just to barely get something. Once again, you want there to be less to do for the survivors. You want the survivors to try and focus more on either getting chased or finding that escape. So don't let them spend too much time on these tasks. So please, less dirt or rework it. Still need to be something that's less tedious, take less time. The next up we have Decrepit Sewers. Yeah, I do not like this map. It needs to be a lot smaller. It can be very difficult to find people on it. The layout should be adjusted because it is a bunch of straight lines. So really it's boring. It kind of stinks. And then the valves are also super tedious. The valves just are very tedious because they keep jamming over and over. So really, the valves should be made so that they can only jam once and then they can't jam again, because that way it would at least be a little less tedious. Like, they still can do that jamming thing, but only once. That way you're not just getting screwed over by RNG. Another thing is that the monster, you can't hear the monster while doing the valves. The glitch came back. They just need to fix this, obviously. So just remember, fix not being able to hear the monster while doing the valve task, because once again, it really sucks that suddenly the monster's right next to me even though I didn't hear him, because the valve task is bugged. I honestly think that out of all the maps though, Sewers is the one that deserves to be outright delayed until post Recode, because I really feel that the map kind of needs a full, bigger revamp compared to the other maps. So, another thing I'd like to mention is that the monster-only areas don't highlight people in Sewers at all. I could understand likely because they're small, but then again, Gilgamesh's monster-only areas highlight people. So Sewers not highlighting people in their monster-only areas is likely a bug. So this really needs to get fixed, as a lot of monsters that don't have free highlight abilities really struggle when this map isn't highlighting people in its monster-only areas. So please add the highlights whenever you're in the monster-only areas, because the monsters could really use it. Now moving on to Frostbitten Ridge. Once again, it needs to be smaller. I feel some areas could be cut off. And also we need a better layout that prevents it being one giant loop, because it kind of is right now. Especially that clip I showed in the beginning. You saw how that area that used to be a dead end now connects into the giant loop? Yeah, that's not a good design at all. I get the frustration of running into a dead end in Chase and then not being able to go anywhere, but really? we're going to just make it so that way now there's a giant loop that's entirely unbeatable unless the monster is like vapor or something. You know, like that just sucks. So please keep dead ends as they are. And as for tasks, I feel like the only problem I have with Ridge in terms of tasks is the snow piles. They should not be draining stamina. Like, I'm okay with the fire axe hitting the planks and sewers draining stamina because that's for the escape, but the snow piles draining stamina when it's a normal task, it shouldn't do that. But yeah, I feel there definitely needs to be more monster walls. Also, there needing to be a smaller layout. And overall, that's kind of the change I would go for. In general, the maps really just need to be smaller, need to have less tasks, and they need their layouts to not have these giant loops because that's not very enjoyable for the monsters. So really, that's what they should try and focus on. And also removing any tasks that are really tedious. Like, I am totally fine with the tasks as they are. I just think that these tedious tasks need to go because they are complained about a lot, and I think a lot of people overreact about them, but they are very tedious, and I really do think they need changes along with just generally being decreased. So yeah, that's what I think about the maps. So now I'll go into some closing thoughts. So that is all of the flaws that I see in Recode that I could think of an improvement for. I really care about this game, and I really want the game to be able to have a strong release, and I feel a lot of these flaws could possibly prevent its release from being strong. Now, just because these flaws are here, does that mean I'm less excited for the release? No, I'm still very excited for this game. You already know it's my favorite, but I absolutely am excited to play Recode when it comes out. But I'd rather have Recode be good sooner than later. Of course, once again, this video was my opinion, and if you disagree with me on anything I said, please put that in the comments for everyone to see, because everyone's opinions deserves to be heard. Ultimately, it'll give people, and possibly the developers, a better vision on what everyone thinks about the Recode and things that should be changed. But overall, I think the Recode just needs to get in the right direction, and it will really be a fantastic game. So that is everything I would change for Recode. So maybe I'll make a video, maybe I won't, but I'll see you guys soon.